In this 4th of July tutorial, we compare the switch technique to the foreach technique and checking to see if a name is in a list of names. You might use this for something like checking a login or something along those lines. We specifically compare the switch case/break /default type construct to a function that returns a bool that iterates through a comparison list or an array that is pre-set up with all the names that could possibly be valid. And in real-life applications, we probably have a lot more names than we have in this program, so we probably wouldn't take either of these approaches. We'd probably use something like a while loop that reads the comparison names in from a file using StreamReader, which is an approach I've described fairly extensively in several previous videos. Or even more likely, we'd use a database select statement in a ADO.NET C# program, which I'll describe in later tutorials. I've touched on ADO.NET in one tutorial previously with the data grid. And here we see the code we used in the previous tutorial, which uses a switch and has the comparison string that's read in from a text box ultimately, and this statement up here. And then we have a case statement for each of the possible valid names. And if we find a valid name in one of the case statements, we set a label equal to name found and do a break, which is important to do a break because I think all the other previous or all the other following cases are executed if you don't do a break. But if none of these cases matches, we have a default statement that's executed if there are no matches, and that sets the label equal to name not found. And this approach, also from the button event handler, we once again set the text box value into the string, but this time we call a function called nameGood and we pass it the string. And if nameGood returns true, then we change the label to name found. And if it returns false, which would execute the else clause of the if statement, then we set the label equal to name not found. And in order to execute the second approach, we need to have a predefined string with all the valid names. So we have string square brackets valid names, which defines a string array, and then we initialize a string array with an initializer list that has each of the valid names: John Carter, Deja Thoris, Sola, Tars Tarkus, and so on. And then in the nameGood function, which is extremely short, we just have a function that returns a bool. A bool is just either true or false values, which works perfectly with the if statement we're passing it to. And then the nameGood receives a string, which is what we got in from the text box, passed to it. And it has a foreach that iterates through each of the values in the array we defined above, and puts it in a temporary string defined as str test name. So in the initial loop of the foreach loop, valid name 0 would be put in str test name, and the second iteration valid names 1 would be put in str test name, and so on. And then within the foreach, we just have an if that says if the name we were passed, the str check name, is equal to the test name, which is the current value that we're reading in through the loop as we iterate through the values, return true. So this will run 2, 4, 6 times for each of the 6 names, and if it hits a comparison that's equal, it'll return true. But if it goes through all 6 iterations and doesn't get a match, it returns false. So really we just have two statements. And since this is the for each is really a compound statement with an if built into it and a return built into it. And then the second statement is just a return false if the for each doesn't get a match. Well, this is the form we use to enter the value, and then we were just looking at the event handler for this button search and the string that shows the result of the search. So let's compile and run this and say put in the name Doug, which wasn't in the list. Do a search and it gives us name not found. But if we put in the name John Carter, which I hope I spelled right, and do a search, we get a name found. So essentially it works identically to the case, but it's more compact code. And as I said, you probably wouldn't use either of these in real life because you're probably going to have more than 6 names, and once you hit 50 names or 1,000 names, you're going to be wanting to read it in from a file with stream reader and a while loop, or select it from a database with a select statement using ADO.net. Well, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned some things from it, and don't forget to subscribe.